back again for another Parent Pivot podcast. I am one of the co-hosts, Steve Cummings.
I'm Julia Cummings.
And hey, sweetie, we have a special guest
Yes,
today.
we do.
And doesn't even live in our country. So we could call ourselves, we have a podcast that reaches all over the world.
Absolutely.
In fact, she found us.
Yeah.
And stuff. And so she's written a book. Her name is Gill Tillmann. She has written a book called Pour the Wine. We're talking about our adult children, again. And stuff. So as I was reading her book, I just thought this is a good friend to talk to. So let me give our audience a little intro about Gill. She lives in Orillia, Ontario, Canada. Hope I spelled that right. With her husband. They don't have any dogs or cats.
Wow. We don't either now.
Well, we don't either. We used to.
We did.
But clearly they don't want any dogs or cats.
Yeah.
And maybe you know why? Because they do travel a lot. Here's why. Their children live in 3 different countries. So they're like literally all over the world. And none of them live in Canada. So we've talked about what happens when your adult kids live in another state like we have. Jill's got them living all over the world.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. So then she says either Gill and her husband did something great as parents or something terribly wrong, and they will own either and both. I love that. She's been a high school teacher, and maybe she still is, and a life coach. She's spent many hours with adults and teens and graduates as they worked to build their plans for their futures. Her curiosity about the struggles of her own adult kids and other parents and emerging adults is what motivated her to the writings in this book. And during the final stages of writing the book, which happened, she and her husband celebrated their first grandchild. Yay! She loves the joys of change and growth and continues her journey of self-discovery now as grandmother. Gill Tillmann, welcome to the Parent Pivot podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have international friends.
Yeah, really. Really.
International acclaim.
Before we start, tell us where your kids live.
So my eldest is Vietnam. He has a bit of a longer story. My daughter is in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. And she just celebrated her 10th year there. And our youngest is in Seattle. And it's our youngest that has followed the most traditional route in life. He met a beautiful young woman who we were so happy that he found such a lovely partner in life. And they are in Seattle, Washington. So they're on the other side of the border, same side of the border as you. And they have a little girl, Charlie Rose.
Oh, nice. I love that.
She's beautiful. And we miss her, but thank goodness for FaceTime and the technology that we have now really enables us to play with her and sing with her and watch her little bumps and bruises as she explores her life.
And how old is she now?
She is 16 months.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. She's definitely exploring for sure at this age. Excuse me. That's not going to stop.
Okay. Audience, please forgive Julia. She's got to clear her throat every once in a while. We just try not to do it in the mic.
So sorry. Well, we wanted to, of course, welcome you, but I want the book because I had something I wanted to read right off the bat about the book. And I just thought it was very notable. It says, even research notes that we as parents want to be in the lives of our adult children. They want us there too. Our children do love us, says the research, but they are more concerned with battling for independence, accepting the consequences of their actions, discovering their own beliefs and values, and becoming less self-oriented. This generation is just taking more time to enter these more traditional adult roles, and delay can test our patience. Come on already. Get married, have babies, move out in any order. Just get it done. That's how I feel.
As boomers, we're like going, what is taking so long?
Yeah. And I talk to people all the time that are saying the same thing. So just that little quote kind of gives me a glimpse into your mindset when you sat down and read or wrote the book. So tell us about that journey of where you were and the aha moment, like, I'm going to write a book and actually doing it.
The book, it's amazing what you can become and what you can do that you had never planned. And I always try and remember that with my children, with my adult children too, is
Yeah.
that there are lots of things that they're going to do that they had not planned. It's just
Right.
the way it happened. But the book started with me journaling my own frustrations, my own really a lot of insecurity around being a mother with adult children. I didn't feel that I had any particular stage in my kids' lives where it was a battle to figure out how did I fit, how should I behave. And I found myself and my husband also that we got to a point where, particularly with our eldest child, who is the son who lives in Vietnam, that there were certain topics we didn't broach with him. We were not being our authentic selves. We were walking on eggshells and feeling very uncertain as to how we fit into his life. And it wasn't only him, because our daughter is 20 months younger, and then our son is another 4 years younger. But with each of them, we found we developed very different relationships. And just being so confused with our eldest, I started journaling. And in a journal, you can be the most honest you can be. It's your own little prayer, really. Just writing the journal and what your hopes are and what your dreams are. Also what your frustrations are, and sort of handing it over and saying, okay, this is it. This is how I'm feeling. This is how it's unfolding. And eventually I thought I should go see a therapist and not just battle it through with me, but speak to a therapist about it.
Yeah.
And I shared that with my children, and they were all so excited that I was going to see a therapist.
Yay, Mom's going to get psychological help.
Yeah, and not even because they thought there was a problem, just that they felt that we all need someone who's there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I wasn't quite brave enough to be vulnerable with my own peers. But in the therapy session, my therapist encouraged me to share some of my journals with my friends. So that's when the Pour the Wine came, because it was more a sharing on the veranda at the cottage, where we were just sipping a glass of wine, or we were having a game of cards and just sipping a glass of wine, being more relaxed.
Right.
And just
We men do cigars and bourbon.
Yeah, I'll be with you on the bourbon. But the environment of just being relaxed and actually being more vulnerable, being authentic, made me realize that there is no such thing as a perfect family.
Yeah.
And there are bumps and bangs along the way, and it's all okay. It's just a matter of being ready to face them together.
Yeah.
And when I found out there were so many other people, I thought, okay, I am not alone in this.
Yeah.
And when I looked for more information, it was, okay, there's not a lot out there. And I often tend to be a little sarcastic. And there was nothing in kind of that, let's be playful about this.
Right.
You don't always have to be so serious.
Right. And then come across as the expert with all the research and I've got all the right answers and Yeah, no, exactly.
So
I love that.
It's just fun to be like, oh my gosh, can you believe they did that? And we'll just share it amongst friends.
Right.
And that's where we kind of remember, like, okay, that is not dinner conversation. Like, what the heck were you thinking? Really? That's the decision you made? No, it's better to share that with the glass of wine going like, okay, I cannot figure them out today.
Yeah.
So your therapist encourages you to share this. Take me to that first meeting when you decided, okay, I'm going to be brave and do this. What did that look like?
So the first meeting, and this woman has been a very good friend of mine, and we were sitting on the veranda, and I said, I'm really troubled and confused that not all the relationships with my kids are going the way I sort of thought they would. And she kind of looked at me, and I said, were we supposed to know what we thought for our kids? Were we supposed to have a plan for them?
He was winging it.
Like, and she just started laughing and she's like, oh my gosh, Jill. And immediately she went into her own story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe that this went on in my family.
Yeah.
And really, just the way she blurted it out and we started laughing, it was like, oh, this is going to be so easy.
Right.
Yes. And one of the things that we talk a lot about that we encourage people over and over and over again is get a support
Yes.
group. And it doesn't have to be a formal support group. It could be a dinner club or, your friends. You have a wine night and bunko night or, whatever that you're sitting around drinking your wine and everybody's talking about the same thing in the same stage.
There's a sense of community that I'm not in this by myself. I'm not the only parent of an adult child that is going through this. And so there's a little bit of comfort to go, I'm not crazy, but we're all facing similar things. And I think you learn off of each other too, when it's out there as a community.
Yeah, we'll get to this later. Your list at the back of your book.
Yeah.
The listy thing.
Yeah, the listy thing. And as we're talking, one thing that I realize maybe we'll do a whole podcast on that we have kind of forgotten is have a sense of humor about all of it.
Yeah.
And that's what you have done with your friends, which I love and appreciate because it's one, when I go to a shower when kids are getting married and they have you fill out the little card saying, what's your best advice? One of my advices that I always give, is that a word?
Advices? You being the Nazi grammar with me are using the word advices?
One of the things I say is always have a sense of humor, because if you make everything heavy, your marriage is always going to feel heavy. And so it's the same thing with every stage, that you've just got to remember to laugh and have a sense of humor. So I feel like you do that really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do make a conscious effort. And even with the kids, sometimes they will give me like an eye roll or a little look. And now we're at the point we just snicker. Yeah. And I like that we've got through the difficult times. And I think that was one of the other takeaways for me as I was writing this book, that there were many friends who would say to me, I am so in awe of what my kids have accomplished and where they are in life. And we can be so proud of how our sons are great husbands or our daughters are great moms and wives. And that, for many of us, was a long haul. And so the book was written while I was in that period of, is my daughter never getting married? Will she never know the love of a spouse and of kids? Yeah. And when we celebrated her 10th year anniversary of living in the United Arab Emirates, I said to my husband, I'm pretty sure now we can say she is not coming home.
Yeah, 10 years is a long time. What led her there? I mean, I'm very curious about Vietnam and that. And those are interesting places to land.
Each of the children have gone for various reasons. My daughter has her chartered accountant. She's an accountant. Mm-hmm. And after 2 years of working in a big firm, she realized that she really enjoyed properties and buying and selling properties, but the size of the property that she was interested in, her mentor, she very cleverly had mentors. One of her mentors said, the money is in the Middle East. Wow. We're really interested in properties and doing that kind of work. You should take a look there. And she's very brave, and she just said, okay. And when a team came to North America to hire for over there, she went. And wow. I don't think, we talk about plans. I don't believe that it was in her head, this is where I'm going to make my home. Right. It has become that way. And so every time we would see her, people would say, oh, is your daughter coming home? Or when is she coming home? Is she moving back? Right. And I would be like, I don't know. Like, if I
Right.
would like her to meet a spouse, meet a
Right.
man. And one time she was dating a fellow from Boston, and I'm like, that's close enough. Yes. Yes.
I'll
I
take
love
it.
that. Boston, good. It's a nice city. That'll be great. And
Yeah.
I never met the fellow or anything else. I was just happy to think, oh, great. And no, it's, and 10 years later, she's there without a significant partner, and she has a dog. And I do poke a little fun at our adult children who seem to like their dogs. And so she has a dog, and she says that I'm the dog's grandmother. So I did write a little bit about that. But that's sort of what took her to the Middle East.
Yeah.
My son, Love, took him to Seattle. He met a young woman who her mother is Canadian, father's American. And so these are the types of things that as we're raising our kids, do we think like, oh, they're going to meet somebody when they're at college
Right.
and they're in college
Right.
in another state.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you've had to deal with them leaving the entire, Western hemisphere and things. And on that note, Jill, I'm curious because, we'll get responses from folks who listen to the podcast and maybe it's more moms than dads. I don't know, but I think we kind of grew up with this expectation that, as you alluded to, that everybody's going to live nearby, or at least if they're going to find jobs, or they'll at least live in the same country.
Right.
But you're our first guest that we're talking to. It's like, hey, my kids don't even live in the same country as I do. What have you found in your journey that has helped you to release that, or speak to that, or even some of your friends in your wine gatherings? I mean, they must have their adult children living out. You don't get to see the grandkids as much. What has been something you find that's been helpful to get through those days and weeks and months where you don't see your grandkids for a while?
So there's two things I'd like to speak to in that. One is comparing. I really learned not to compare my family to someone else's family.
Amen.
And I would look, and part of me, there was a great jealousy that my friends were becoming grandparents and they were having their grandchildren, or even that they would have we were just at a multi-generational birthday party for a 26-year-old, and she had her partner there.
Yep.
Her sister was there with her partner also. And I would think like, oh, I wish I could sit at the dinner table with my children and with their partners. So I really learned to just accept that our family is our family.
Yep.
Comparison is such a horrible habit.
Yes.
And it is best to forget the whole comparison thing. But the second, I think it's a blessing, really, is that our friends are willing to share and open their doors. And we all sit around the dinner table and we are invited. And the first Christmas we had to spend when no child could come home.
Wow.
I said to my husband, we will never spend it at home again. We will go somewhere so that we're not in the family home, expecting conditions to unfold.
Yep.
Another bad word, expectations.
Exactly.
And it was just, the prayer was answered right away. My girlfriend phoned, hey, we're all over at our place. Come on over and join us. There's room for 2 more at the table.
Oh, that's great.
We went over, and just opening the back door and hearing all the noise in the kitchen.
Yeah.
The girls and their significant others, and it was just so beautiful. But we're really blessed that we have that kind of friend that bring us in. And for other people, it's a matter of looking out. One woman I know who is divorced and does not live in the same home as her children. She went to a nursing home
Oh, good for her.
And
Wow.
said it was such a wonderful experience.
She got her eyes off herself and onto somebody else.
Mhm.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I think sometimes we get caught up in our expectations. We get
Yes.
caught up in tradition. Things have to be the same as they've always been. We
Right.
look at other families, and that's all really difficult thinking.
Yeah, no, I totally love that. And for example, we've had a couple of holidays too where our kids have gotten into this cycle with their in-law families
Right.
that
Every other year.
every other year, Thanksgiving with us, Christmas with the other one, stuff like that. And so one year, it was Thanksgiving, and we would have been by ourselves, and we got invited to go to one of our in-law families. So we went and had Thanksgiving up there with them, which was fun.
Yeah.
And then this last Christmas, the kids were at their in-law families for this Christmas we just had. And I looked at Julie. I said, Georgia, I don't know what, I'm sure in Canada you get like the winter weather like we do. We're originally from Southern California. So bare trees, gloomy. It doesn't do us good. Like you said, staying home just makes it more difficult to get through.
Yeah.
So I turned to her, I said, let's go away. So we went down to the Dominican Republic and went to a resort and spent Christmas down in Punta Cana.
On the beach.
On the beach.
It was
Lovely.
great.
And we'll probably do more of that as things happen. We'll either do like you said, because I think getting your eyes off yourself and comparing, and then also with that can go as parents, and we've heard from adult kids too, we can slip into making it about us and try to guilt them into you're not with us and I'm all alone and I'm somehow the victim and whatever. That doesn't play out at all. That just kind of lessens the relationship and can weigh heavy on that.
Right. And we can really inflict guilt on our children in very subtle ways.
Yes.
So that's something else that I've really been aware of and really been conscious of is, am I making my children feel guilt? And I will often say to them, I am not saying this for any other reason except to say, I missed you.
Right.
I'm not saying it. All I'm telling you is that I love you and I missed you.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things you said in your book, I wrote down, I'm getting ahead of myself probably, but you talked about, keep yourself emotionally healthy. Your happiness can't be dependent on the happiness of your child. And I just love that phrase, keeping yourself emotionally healthy, because I don't think that is something that most people in general think about. Even if they go to a therapist and all of that, within the context of being a parent of adult children, we aren't necessarily thinking of ourselves as emotionally unhealthy in this area. We're just thinking these are natural emotions that we feel. And you talk a lot about trying new things and your personal growth and things like that, all in the context of staying emotionally healthy. And I really like that a lot.
Yeah. And our generation of children are very wise to that.
Yeah.
They know.
They notice.
They know about emotional intelligence. They've learned about it. I don't think I ever once when my kids were young really thought about, am I making them emotionally intelligent? And they're very conscious of that.
Yeah.
And I remember when our children were young, a girlfriend had said to me, oh, you know that saying, you're only as happy as your least happy child? Like you can only be that happy? Like, really? I don't want to be that.
Right.
I don't want to have my emotions and my well-being based on someone else's.
Right. It's got a piece of codependency in there. Like if you're not okay, then I can't be okay. I somehow have to make you not feel that. I'm trying to manage their emotions in their life and fix it and whatever. It's like, you know what? We do our best for 18 to 20 years. And then what we want is responsible, mature adults. And guess what? They're going to leave the nest and they may crash, but they'll get back up and go. And we're just there to kind of help them learn to keep flying. And that is the hardest thing to do, I think, as parents, is to say, I've got to watch my child suffer, and I don't want them to suffer. I think that's where the rubber meets the road when we say you want relationship over being right. If you try to get in there and fix things and say I'm right and do this and whatever, you're going to fracture relationships. So we always mention that in every podcast, and you've mentioned it throughout your book that, as human beings, we learn from experience.
Yeah.
And I do remember you saying that in another podcast, and And my little saying is, being right is often very expensive.
Good point.
Amen.
I like
Very
that.
Amen.
costly, very costly. And the other is the that I did mention in the book in the little listy things is like play for the long game.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because often we get caught up in, this specific Thanksgiving tradition,
Exactly.
that must be fulfilled to check the box on we have had Thanksgiving and this has
Yeah.
been done. So
Yeah.
just to remain open to the relationship you want to have to continue to grow and
Yeah.
develop further
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
get caught up in, no, that's not, it's only right if we have Thanksgiving this way.
Right.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Do you guys celebrate Thanksgiving? I've never even
Yes,
thought of
we
that.
do, but it's not at the same time. So ours
Oh,
is earlier in the year.
okay.
But we do give thanks for the harvest and
Okay.
everything
There
that
you go.
and
That makes sense.
There you
Yeah.
go.
I'm like, okay, I've never thought of if
We
Canada.
we obviously copied it from our friends up north and ours later in the calendar.
Yeah. So talk about your phrase is zip it. Talk about that phrase.
the zip it phrase.
Yeah.
That is actually quite common. I've discovered that there are lots of people that are exchanged, particularly with their spouses, when one spouse is dealing with the adult children and the others in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My husband calls it ticker lock. Like just
There you go.
Yeah, and they even made an emoji for us for that.
yes, the zippered mouth. But
Yeah.
there are so many times where, and it comes back to being right, is that you want to say something, but in your heart that it will not land. It won't matter how you phrase it, how you mix your words. It's not going to land with your truest intentions.
Right.
Right.
Or it doesn't matter in the long game.
No.
No.
And they know inside that mom and dad were right. They were telling me about this, that, or the other, and we've said that in the podcast. Look, when they do crash and burn on something like that, your job is to scoop them up and go, let's go get some pie. Let's go do this. Whatever. And again, you zip it, or as we say, keep your mouth shut. Same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they know we don't have to champion it. They know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I like that with the long game. Like one of the things I say to people often is you want to be the person that when they do crash and burn, that they are coming to you, not someone else. And if you make yourself unsafe and they know that you're going to say, I told you so, or you didn't listen to me, or you're always trying to fix something, or you're always giving your opinion, they're not going to come to you. They know how you feel about things. They know what you think. They've spent all those years with you. They've heard you say it. So you don't have to say any of it, but you want to be that person that is there for them to help pick up the pieces and to walk side by side with them
right.
when something falls apart.
And that's pretty much my son who's in Vietnam. That was the issue with him, was I never fully listened to the emotions that he was expressing.
Mm.
And that's something I never, the therapy term validated.
Yes.
Everyone needs to be validated. And because I'm such a solution seeker, a
Yes.
fixer,
Guilty.
and I always have faith that it will work out. I know it will work out. There is a plan for you, and it's going to unfold, and it may take a long, long time.
Yeah.
But because of that, I just go into did you try this? Could you try that? Do you think this might work? And I forgot. So this is where I've really grown personally, is I forgot to just listen and hear, and respond with something like, that must make you feel so sad.
Yeah.
Or, oh, how depressing. I can feel that in my heart for you right now. And not get into the fixing it.
Yeah.
And acknowledge that when an adult child says to you, Mom, you don't understand my world,
Yeah.
instead of saying, oh, yes, I do. I'm living in the same world. I know it exactly. But just say, no, I don't. So share with me. Share with me.
Yeah. And you're touching on one of the things that there's a book called Seven Desires. We all have them as humans, and it's, the need to be chosen and loved and things like that. But one of them is we want to be understood and we want to be heard. So with that means on the other side, we zip it. Because you can't be understood and heard. We don't listen to hear and come up with a response. We seek understanding. What's it like to be in your shoes? What's it like to, oh, you know what? It's a little different than when I was at this age. I can see how that's different. Wow, I can only imagine what that must feel like. I get it. And that's it. That's all they want. And now you've made yourself a safe partner. We call it a partner. We want you to pivot from being a parent to partner, mentor, coach, whatever. And you pivoted well, and you keep that door open, like going, whenever something else comes up, it's like, well, Mom and Dad have really changed. They're not telling me what to do anymore. They actually listen and seek understanding and understand what I'm going through. And that will take you to the top of the charts. You'll be a rock star partner if you can just become proficient at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think it's hard because also another thing we do, even if we're not validating, we're listening to a story that we can relate to sometimes. And we want to say, oh, I totally get this, that this happened to me. And that just turns it back on you. We think we're relating. We think that we are somehow connecting with them. But in their eyes, it's like, okay, you just turned and made it about you.
Yeah. So it's another time to zip it or keep the mouth shut.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That's another step in my growth, was just, I know how you feel because that happened to me.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's hard. Okay, let's see what else I took notes on. I thought it was funny when you said all that independence gets in the way of us being together. Because you talk about them becoming independent and that you raise them to be independent. And that's what we all want, right?
Right.
But then that independence really gets in the way because I really want us all
Don't
to
you understand?
together.
Be independent around my plans for your life. I love you and have a wonderful plan for your life. Great to be independent, but it's got to revolve around me.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? That independence was so, I don't know why that was one of the values that really spoke to me as far as raising my children.
Mm-hmm.
And I taught for years, I taught high school and I taught special education. I had children who were very bright, but they were bright at all the wrong things, very bad things. And I taught at one point in a psychiatric hospital, one time in a detention center. And when I was working with these students, I felt that their environment was one that wasn't nurturing. And so what they needed was to become independent, to recognize their own gifts and what they had inside them that made them valuable. And I think that's the only thing I can think of is why I wanted my children to be independent, to know their own worth, to know their value. And then it just gets in the way now.
It does. I just thought that was classic. I'm like, yes, that really does get in the way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because they can look after themselves. They're very independent. They know their own minds and they have their own plans. And that isn't what I had written down.
Right.
No, again, it's within the context of what we want.
Right.
So, and we call them partners. One thing that you referred to in your book was friends don't fix it. And I liked that. And you kind of alluded to the fact, think of your kids as your neighbor over the back fence, that you really enjoy talking to them and whatever, but you're never going to tell your neighbor how to fix their house or what to do. Unless they ask, you might have, here's a good painter. Here's a good whatever.
Yeah. See, that's an ugly color of your house. Why don't you paint it?
So I liked that analogy of just thinking of them differently. You're thinking of them as a friend, as a neighbor, as someone that you're not going to be telling them what to do.
Yeah. And I wrote down one thing to remind me of the quote, and it's interesting that it came up. But quite often the the adult children don't really know what we are either. So um, there's a little chapter about playing cards with kids,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden we get to the point where we're all adults, and so we're laughing about very adult manners. And Molly, my niece, it was her quote in the chapter, because she was the one who would always say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm still here. So
Yeah, exactly.
do not joke about that kind of thing because I'm here." And she said, "It brings me great joy to be friends with my parents and aunts and uncles. And it really is a relationship like no other.
Wow.
Sometimes friends, sometimes guides, sometimes other things that I can't articulate." So
Wow.
and everyone who's in the book, they read the chapter where they were sort of implied or
Right.
after Molly read that chapter, that's what she wrote back to me. And I think it's interesting that we started the conversation by saying, they're not as invested in the relationship as we are. We have what's called an intergenerational stake because we've invested a lot in them.
Yeah.
So we do care more. They do love us, but they're just as confused as to what the role is going to look like.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Right.
it's friends, sometimes it's a guide, sometimes it's a mentor. I have friends who do mentor their children because their adult children are in the same field or the same profession.
And as you mentioned that, Jill, I also want to say we had a situation happen with our youngest Jackson. We interviewed him on the podcast, and we had a moment where I had to release him to other men to father him. He was getting ready to leave to go to Mija, Spain, with his soon-to-be fiance. And Julia surprises me in the podcast, like we do not plan anything except hit the record button. Here we go. And she goes, "I want you to tell that story about Jackson." And basically, what you're saying is, I said, I've done everything I possibly can to be dad. I'm not going to stop being dad, but I'm stopping being the instructional part of dad. You already know what I believe. You know my heart. You know things like that. But there are going to be some other men who will come along and they're going to fill in some gaps. And they're going to speak to your heart that maybe I haven't been able to, or you can hear better coming from them than you can from me. I think that's the bigger thing. And that's not a threat. It's not a threat to be a mom or dad. You want that. You want them to grow and learn from some other mentors and people like that because they're filling in the gaps. And it's that whole thing, like Julia might tell me, "Hey, don't wear that shirt, it's super ugly," or whatever. And I go, "What are you talking about?" And then someone over here goes, "Wow, Steve, that shirt is super ugly." And I'll listen to that person, but I don't listen to her because she's supposed to say that. And it's like a different filter, but all of a sudden I'll listen to that filter and go, "Oh, it's okay."
Yeah. We have many
You said that
sets of
many times.
ears. We have many sets of ears.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And so, it's when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
There you go.
And that teacher is often not your parent. It will be someone who you've chosen as a mentor.
And you know what? On that thought, I do want to take a quick break. I don't even know if we're in the middle of our podcast or we're just going to keep going, but I do want to hold up your book. It's called Pour the Wine by Gill Tillmann. And you can there we go. See, it's on both sides of the screen. There you have it.
Yeah.
Okay. We urge you guys to get a copy. And like Jill said, these are stories that she has shared about her own life and her friends and just bouncing things off. We loved it. We laughed through it. And there's a lot of things that we found like, hey, we're thinking the same way. We're on the same page and things like that. So I want to make sure you saw that. We're going to put that in our show notes so you can get a copy of that.
So one more question before we go to the listy things, because I do want to do the listy thing. And if you don't want to answer that's fine. What have you and your husband done together that has encouraged growth aside from your kids, just having your own independent life away from them?
Well, I think one thing that's really important is the sitting together with the calendar and together working through what is important to us and what do we want to make sure gets completed, accomplished, or done. When the kids are young, you're always racing, swimming, who's driving to basketball, and when is the trip.
You get those two, I'll get this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now we make a very conscious effort weekly, monthly, and now we've decided to even go yearly because we find as we age, time goes much faster.
Gosh,
Oh my
yes.
goodness.
And just being able to say, we really need to prioritize this. So, for example, right now I'm sitting beside a ski hill. And we can ski when we come home, we can ski right up onto our deck. It's very
Wow.
lovely.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
So this year, my husband has just retired, and we said we're mapping out the month of February. We will go and live at our little condo.
Nice.
So that's what we've been doing together, is being very conscious about setting our times and our goals and what needs to be done, and
Nice.
to make sure that we are being involved in what it is that interests us. The other, we've also developed a pattern with our children, and every time when we leave, we must know the next time we're going to see them.
Oh,
Oh, I like that.
Now we giggle because now it's like you have to say, and it doesn't mean it will happen, but
right.
we said, like, okay, I will see you in March when Dad and I fly to Seattle.
Yeah.
That's great.
Which costs less than going to Vietnam and Abu Dhabi.
Yes. And we're lucky our daughter, who is in Abu Dhabi, this week she's actually in Charlotte, Charleston, and Miami,
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
wow.
visiting three different properties. So at one time when she was in New York, I got to visit her there.
Yeah.
But this time I said, can I come when you're in the States? And she's like, Mom, it's a whirlwind week.
Oh,
But you know what I liked about that? You asked permission. You know, you
Yes.
didn't assume that, oh, she wants to see me, so I'm just going to go down there and be there. You backed up and said, I know she's got a life. She's here for work. And you had to respect that. It's like,
Yeah.
again, independence. She's doing her job, and that's what you want to celebrate and whatever. But you didn't make it about you.
Right.
yeah.
And not to be hurt when they say,
Right.
we can't make that one. Like,
Right.
oh, and again,
It doesn't mean you're not loved.
and I love what you've said is, don't turn it back on me.
Yeah.
It's us.
Yeah.
And how are we going to function? So great. I love that question, Julia, because it reminds me that we are indeed doing things to make our lives happy and full.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, they're watching, they get it.
Yeah.
And I think, we have one of the biggest things that we've had to address a few times recently is when kids aren't talking to their parents. And part of what I hear over and over again is those kids have complete control. They know that you desire a relationship with them so bad, and it's going to kill you to not have a relationship with them. And so it's almost as if they manipulate and exploit that fact by not speaking to you. And so one of the greatest things we can do is really have our own life and be emotionally healthy and, have a good marriage or good other relationships around us, and that we actually have a life
Right.
that
Right.
aside from them.
Yeah.
It's still going to hurt. I mean, kids don't get it until they have kids of how much you love that person. They just don't get it. And then they have this little person that they love more than anything. And then suddenly this light bulb goes on.
And they start saying things, and you just sit back and smile, go, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unconditional love is a difficult
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
To know that we are always loved.
Okay.
So, by the way, before you get to that list, I counted them. She's got 18 things on page 145 that says tools and strategies, the listy thing.
The listy.
We only came up with 14, but we've already talked about some of them.
Yeah.
So she's got 4 more on there than we do.
Yeah. And yeah.
The editor, when I was writing the book, it was really the editor that said, I need some little summary or something to hang on to. And I was like, oh, I didn't want to do a listy thing. But I did do the listy thing, and I just did it more for fun, but also to recognize that there are tools. Some may sit with certain parents really nicely. Others you might have to sort of take a second look at. And it was more for really to keep my editor happy, um, but also to just have a nice little succinct. Here it is. Here's a summary, and
Yeah.
Right.
let's just see, what do I need to learn, and what did I like. My girlfriend, she said, I got to the end. Hold family round table meetings. What's a round table meeting? I'm like, okay, well, let's go back and find out
Yeah.
where it is in the book.
And I just want to thank you that we recovering type A personalities are glad that there are lists in the book somewhere that we can follow.
Well, and I was going to say, as a therapist, if somebody's struggling with this and I told them to get this book, I'd say turn to page 145, go print it out and get it laminated and put it on your fridge or next to your phone or somewhere, so that when you are talking to your kids or you're forgetting, it is right there in your face to remember these principles. And so that's why I like the lists. I think it's very helpful. It's a helpful tool.
Through it.
That's
Some of these
good.
we already talked about.
Yeah. So
Thank
let
you.
me just read through these and you can stop me if there's one that you feel like we haven't talked about enough or you would like to expound on. So listen. I think we did that. Be a friend. Stay curious. Set boundaries and respect boundaries.
Now, let me ask you, Jill, when you say that, we've talked about boundaries a lot on this. So kind of give us, when you say set boundaries, respect boundaries, what's your experience in doing all that?
I'm really happy you interjected there, because I wish I had been more descriptive in defining what the boundaries are, because we have had several conversations, book clubs that have read the book and groups of people that have come together to read the book and discuss it. And most people feel that boundaries are things that you set for someone else. And we have talked a lot about the 26-year-old who is still in the basement playing video games, hasn't left the house. How do you motivate them? And most people are saying, like, the boundary is you must pay rent, you must do your own laundry. And that is not what I mean by a boundary. The boundaries are what the parent does. A boundary is what you set for yourself. It does not make the other person do anything.
So it's not meant to be punitive. It's meant for yourself and to stay healthy.
One example that I love is one of the moms said, I worry so much about my child's eating, that he's down there and not eating. And we talked about boundaries, and she said, I'm going to make him one meal a day, and that is what I'm going to do for me. And she said to him, I'm making you a meal a day. If I'm home for lunch or I'm home for dinner, I will make a meal. I will take it down for you. Whether you eat it or not, that's up to you. That's your decision. I would like to set that boundary for myself. I will make you one meal a day. And we talk about, if you're doing something and it's for you and you acknowledge it's for you, that you want to feel more comfortable that they're eating well. And you cannot force them to eat. But what can you do? You can prepare the meal, take it to them. It's their choice.
Yeah.
Whether they have it. So boundaries are tough, because they are often what you need to be doing, not what you need others to be doing.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. Validate feelings. Zip it.
We've talked about those.
Bite your tongue.
What's the difference between zip it and bite your tongue? Or is there a difference?
It's very subtle. Zip it is like you don't say a word, and the others is you have to bite your tongue because you go, and
it's I started to say something and I needed to stop myself. Okay. Identify expectations. I assume that means expectations that you yourself have, not identifying expectations that someone else has of you.
It can work both ways.
Okay.
Right there, it's, I need to know, what do my kids expect? And that sort of feeds into the think of the long game and
Okay.
the family roundtable discussions. Because
Mhm.
if we're going on a holiday together, what do you want from the holiday? What do I want from the holiday? Let's set it out on the table right now.
Yeah.
Good point. I like that. I like that a lot. Um, it's always good to be preemptive in potential issues.
Yes.
And traveling would be one of those that, I have this expectation. So good. Um, know the cost of your opinions. You said that before, and it does come with a cost. And one of the things that you say in the book is um, opinions always come out as a criticism for whatever reason.
Yep.
And we need to wait till we're asked what our input is and not solicit. I mean, none of us like unsolicited advice. In fact, everything we've been talking about in this podcast, it's like, if put yourself in our shoes. When we were growing up, did we want all this stuff happening with our parents? No, we did the exact same thing. Mom, Dad, shut up. I get it. I don't need to hear from you anymore. If I want your opinion, I'll ask you for it. I mean, we did the same thing.
Yeah.
And now that I'm a parent and partner and living that, I'm like, going, you don't want to hear my opinion?
Yeah.
Hello.
I'm so much smarter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not, but
Okay.
Okay, the family
family roundtable.
Yeah,
Is there anything that you wanted to say about that?
that is like actually to sit down and discuss, and particularly in the instance where families have adult children who move out and then they come back.
Oh,
okay.
Have you actually sat down at the table and said, okay, this is what we expect? I have so many people, like, I'll say, oh, I noticed that, Joanna and Bob are back in your house, and it will be a daughter and her husband, and they've returned. And oh, that's interesting. How is that working? Well, we're wondering, should we ask them to pay rent? Like, wait a minute, they're already back
Right.
in the house.
It's a little late.
Disgusting.
A little.
And the laundry and meals.
Right.
And it's just nice to, as Julia said, to just be proactive.
yeah.
Okay, you'd like to come home? We get it. You want to save money? Okay, so how is it going to look when we all live together?
Right.
Yeah.
Both sides need to buy into that, so you're not having any like if there's dishes or something in the sink, all of a sudden you're grumbling beneath your breath, and that comes out in other ways. And if you don't have those conversations ahead of time, just to say, hey, what would you guys like to do, and things. In fact, we're in that situation right now.
Yeah, we have our daughter and son-in-law live in our basement apartment with their 1-year-old.
And and again, we being counselors, we set that up ahead of time. We just said, hey, we have shared space and we have sacred space. You're not allowed in my bedroom.
No,
I mean, they knock. I mean, obviously, but we share the upstairs, the kitchen, the main area, and things like that. And it's worked out well. I mean, they've been here over a year, and there's nobody getting on each other's nerves over anything because we've gone through all that. And
that we're aware of.
no, and they say thank you every single time we watch our granddaughter for whatever, because they're both actors, so they're out busy doing stuff. And but yes, I try to tell them, look, all we are is wind under your wings, but we're blessed because we get to watch Florence while you go out and fulfill your dreams. So it's a win-win. But we always keep things on the top. Jamie Lynn has interviewed us on her own podcast. Yeah. We're all on the same page and we're enjoying it. But you're right. We've had roundtable discussions, and even if they're coming in and there's no deadline that they would move out, do you have other points of, hey, after so much time, you might want to revisit and have another roundtable discussion if things pop up that need to be addressed?
Well, I'm not going to claim to be an expert, but I know it never hurts to improve communication. And
exactly.
Even if it's just to say, we are loving this.
Exactly.
We really hope that you are too.
Yeah.
And if there's any issues, let's head them off. And let's
and again, we're not expecting them to do certain things. Like sometimes I'm traveling and I'm going, shoot, the guy's coming over to pump the septic tank, and I'll ask Taylor, hey, are you going to be around? He goes, yeah, absolutely. And I think he feels great about being able to step in and take care of things while I'm not on the property and stuff. And we're always telling them, hey, we love it. They're telling us the same thing, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, seek professional help when needed or suggested. Who would be suggesting it?
Oh, we've had suggestions even as we sit sipping our wine on a veranda in there, just to say to someone, and it actually it is pretty funny, and I did mention it in the book when I told my girlfriend that I was seeing a psychotherapist, and she said, "Oh, is it Winnie?" I'm like, "Yes," and she says, "Oh yeah, I've seen her. My girls have seen her. Isn't she great?" So
Everybody knows her.
there have been people who will say, "Oh, because I can say, oh, I just spoke to Julia and Steve, and I know
Yeah.
Julia would be a great,
Yeah.
reference for you and someone that would really."
Yeah.
So people do that. That's the
Yeah.
suggestion.
Yeah.
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 Well, and you find that when you open up and share something, everybody else feels more freedom to do so. It's just one of those things that opens up everybody.
Yeah. And before you finish off with those last 4 or 5, I'm going to throw a little pitch in here for Julia, mostly. Okay. Because you're exactly right. You're trying to find the right therapist. It's like you're spending a lot of money. I mean, it can be upwards of 150, 200, more than that a
Yep.
session. And so on this podcast, we've told our listeners, hey, you're listening to us over the course of 2 years. If you've got a connection, we'd love to be able to help out. So Julia, if is making herself available to do some relationship coaching, and that doesn't mean that you're committed to a long-term payment of having to do therapy the whole time. But if you have a certain situation that you want to just discuss, we have a three session package that we'll mention in our show notes, and she's making herself available to do that. And we're cutting the cost in half.
Yeah.
So that people can afford it.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. And when people find out that, that's what I mean. And the next one actually is be vulnerable with friends, groups, and associates.
Yes.
If you are being vulnerable, then it allows people to say, I just spoke with a woman. I think she would be great
right,
for you. Just
right.
feel
Like anything else, it's word of mouth referral.
right.
It's like,
Yeah.
hey, I've got this electrician. Hey, I just talked to this person. They'd be great for what's
Yeah.
going on.
The
Yeah.
suggestions aren't cruel. Like, oh man, you need to see a therapist.
Well, it's kind of like we don't want to tell anybody that, because it's like some people are so, well, you go to a therapist because there's something wrong
There's
with
a
you.
stigma.
Well, yeah, I'm human. There's a lot of things wrong with me, and I need to get a third party eyes on what's going on, and going, hey, you know what? It might be you. Oh, okay. I never looked inward. I always thought it was everybody else's problem.
Well, and I tell people oftentimes counseling can just be like, when you have the stomach flu and you finally throw up and you feel such relief, you feel better. That going and seeing a counselor can just be that. It doesn't always have to be digging into you. It can be a throwing up session where I just need to get this out of me, and that's going to be helpful. Just feeling like you've got some bricks off of your shoulders.
And I married a wife who likes people throwing up on her.
Definitely. Okay. And vulnerability. I cannot stress that enough. I just think that's key in any relationship.
So, but on that, I'm curious, in your circle of friends and whatever, on that vulnerability issue, there's always, I run into this because I've got a ministry for men. And I think once I open myself up, it makes the group safer. And sometimes maybe I'm more of an extrovert, and Julia's more the introvert, but I'm getting better. I'm learning to enjoy time alone. But with that, I think sometimes some people might be a little bit slower to open up because they're looking for that safe thing. Have you noticed that as well too?
Yes. And I think you're absolutely right. It just takes one person to sort of open their heart and bear a little, and then the door, opens a little bit to someone else.
Right.
So it's almost like, okay, who's going to be brave now?
Right.
And then there are others who will go home. And then the next time you get together, they'll say, I really thought a lot about what everyone was saying. And I thought that I was saved and that didn't apply to me. But I have seen, so sometimes it just takes a little bit.
Yeah. There's the verbal processors like myself, and the internal processors just might take a little bit longer, but super, super helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Except you don't know what you don't know. And we don't know a lot.
We're not experts at everything.
Which I have to say, because you alluded to this, that you were out there looking for, resources, and there really aren't any. And one thing that I say to people is, you get to this stage of life and you are so unprepared for it. The one thing that I heard all the time, as I was raising my kids is make sure that your marriage is intact, because once those kids leave, it's just you guys. And then, and that would be the one thing that people would talk about all the time. Nobody talked about how difficult it was to have adult children. Nobody talked about the loneliness that you might feel. Nobody talked about you go from 100 miles an hour to zero really quickly.
They don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
The need level just went off the cliff.
Yeah.
So we don't know all of that. And even now, even though we're talking about it now, 10 years from now, we don't know what we don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know. I always wonder, so what's the next stage?
Exactly. Oh, know your principles and values.
Key. You have to have your foundation to come home to. You have to know where you rest and where you draw your strength and where you find your faith. And values are so strong. And when we live into our values, we are stronger because we live into them. But we need to understand what they are and what lines will you not cross because of your values.
Right.
So there's very difficult times in life right now with gender identity and types of birth, single people having children, and so values can be very conflicting. And if your values are so strong, you will find strength living into them. It will also give you strength knowing where you will draw your line.
Yeah.
Why you will draw that line.
And you don't have to compromise your values to have relationship. I think that that's important, because I hear people compromising what they believe to please their adult children so that they can have relationship. And so I don't think that's necessarily healthy either. It's okay to have your values and disagree with your kids and have mutual respect for one another in that.
Right.
Yeah. And what was I was just thinking about that, and I just lost my train of thought. But the values, and also too, our adult kids know our values.
Yes.
So we don't have to beat them over the head with Bible verses or whatever. They know that you're going to fracture a relationship. They may choose something different than yourself. Like you mentioned some stuff, like sexuality is just big in our cultures, both in Canada and the US and things like that. It's like, you know what? Can I still love the person and who they are as my son or my daughter, and set those things aside? Because that's the key. They're going to see right through that if you're going to continue to preach on it. And because it's your value, they've chosen to not honor you, or not necessarily honor you, but they've chosen something different. And that's okay. So it's not an impingement on how well of a mother or father you are. It doesn't define who you are, or your identity, and things like that. So let them find themselves, whether they accept your faith, don't accept your faith. Our kids had to struggle with that and making their own decisions for themselves. And it's like, how can I still love them? Because they're my son, they're my daughter, period.
And you can have relationships.
And that's what I meant by it makes the boundaries, those safe boundaries, easier, because both parties understand the values that are being expressed.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that your value is wrong and my value is right. It's just, this is what I value, that's what you value, and now we can play tennis together.
There's a mutual respect.
You said in your book, you were talking about finding I wrote it down.
Finding an activity that you
can share where you don't have to talk about it.
That's a listy thing that we skipped over.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Where did I skip?
Meet together for shared interest activities.
Oh,
I missed it.
Well, that's,
Or is that something different?
No, that's exactly it. Meet together for shared interest activities. When you're on a ski lift and all of our kids ski, you're not talking to one another. And then when you're going up the lift, you're in that beautiful position where people are beside you and not across from you. So the conversation can be quite light and then you get to the top and you separate and you ski down and then you come together. You know, the best conversations are when you're driving with your children or when you're on that ski lift side.
Time together, it all comes out naturally.
Yeah. It's just sharing life at that point. We're having fun together and we're sharing life. We don't have to talk about some deep thing or
not there to change their mind.
Opinions or politics or
I'm there to enjoy their company.
Yeah. I like.
Okay.
And then the last one that you have is You Do You.
Love that.
Yeah. No point in comparing what other people are doing. Just be you, be authentic, be open.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's part of knowing yourself. So how do you do you if you don't know you?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think, you know, when the kids leave home, oftentimes we are finding ourselves all over again. Like, what do I like to do now? Because maybe when I was, you know, I got married at 25, what I liked to do when I was 25 was very different than what I like to do now at 62. So, so it's a different situation.
You still like burgers and movies, though?
I still like burgers and movies.
Good thing. Me too.
Yeah.
Keep things simple.
Yeah. Jill, is there anything that we haven't brought up that you've been itching to tell our podcast listeners about your book? It's called Pour the Wine. We're talking about our adult children again, and we will highly recommend it. You'll have a good laugh over it. But anything that we've missed asking you about?
No, I think it's just really important to understand that it's certainly not written by an expert. I really did bare my soul here and told stories to really make people realize they are not alone.
Yeah.
This is a difficult time. It is documented that this generation takes longer to find their footing. And that patience will be a great attribute for us to hold on to right now as we are parents. Children finding themselves in the adult world.
That's awesome. Yeah. So we always give our little thing here at the end of our podcast to say how to get a hold of us. In fact, Jill got a hold of us, I believe, through Instagram. Didn't you message us?
I did.
Yeah. So I'm not on. This is what we pay Jamie Lynn for. So Jamie was like, "Hey, got an author up in Canada. She wants to talk to you guys." I go, "Great." So she helped us do that. But you can get a hold of us through direct message on either Facebook or instant message. What is your Instagram, Jill?
So my Instagram, you'll find it if you look for Gill Tillmann, but it is fished.my.wish.
Okay. There you go.
And Jill, we need to say this. Jill is with a Gill. It is not a J. It is a G.
Yep. They do it differently up in Canada, apparently.
We do.
And stuff. But anyway, we encourage you to get a copy of her book and read it. If you want to get a hold of us, you can, like I said, instant message us on the social media platforms. In fact, last podcast, we did something that we'd gone viral on TikTok of all things. Now, the only TikTok I know is this clock behind me. So Jamie Lynn took care of that. We had like 11,000 hits talking about what happens when the adult kids and the parents are not talking to each other. And so, we're on TikTok. I don't know what that means, but instant messages, Parent Pivot Podcast there, Instagram and Facebook. And then to get a hold of us on relationship coaching, send us an email at parentpivotpodcast@gmail.com. Do you have anything else you want to say?
I do not.
Jill Tillmann, it has been so much fun having you on our podcast. You are officially our longest podcast interview that we've had, and so we've had that means our hearts have connected, and we've gotten a lot of information and content out, and we just highly recommend her book and stuff like that. So maybe we'll have to meet. We have to go to Canada and go skiing or something.
There you go. We'd like that.
Yeah, or we'll go down to the Caribbean or something. There we go.
Great.
Anyway, thanks for being with us on the Parent Pivot Podcast.
So much. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thanks, Jill.